Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start. If you wouldn't mind just taking your seats, please. Those are taking their seats. And everybody online, I'd like to welcome you back. I'm going to turn things over to Madison. Madison is a social worker, St. Mike's. She works with multiple sclerosis patients. She does a fantastic job. I'm going to let Madison talk just a little bit about herself, and then she'll get into the presentation. The presentation is going to cover financial resources and supports that are available to MS patients. So I'm going to turn things over to Madison. Madison, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. A couple technical difficulties this afternoon, I guess. Thank you guys so much for having me. Again, my name's Madison. I'm the current social worker at the Barlow MS Clinic at St. Michael's Hospital. Really appreciate the invitation to come and chat with you. Hope you've had a good morning so far. I guess I can. Ian, do I have to rely on you for my slides or?
Well, I'll you know what? I'll do it because let me just see here. It's going to be easier if I do it because unless you go to, well, it is sharing, but I think I'll just do it because it might be
easier. If you could just do it, that would be great. Yeah, I'll just prompt you if that's cool.
Yep, that's fine.
Great. I guess we'll just hop to the next slide, please, and just a quick overview of what I'm going to outline today.
Yeah, I'd love to, but just technical difficulties for 1 second.
I'll just do a quick disclaimer then while we're hopping to the next slide. I just want to just put it out there that I'm here on a volunteer basis. I'm not here in an official capacity from the Barlow Clinic, and really just want to provide a general overview of some of the programs that I help folks in my work apply for, depending on what their various needs are, sort of throughout their MS journey. This is very general, very high level. So I'd say if you do want more information or more support, like please speak with your care team, speak with your providers, speak with your neurologist to kind of get into some of the more detailed pieces about some of these programs and if folks are eligible.
So the agenda is up. I don't know if you can see it on your end.
I can see it, but it says like next slide for me.
Oh, well, the agenda is okay.
Okay, no problem. So I'm going to dive into some financial supports for folks for kind of short-term and long-term disability. It's going to review EI sickness benefits, Canada Pension Plan disability, as well as Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Program. Then going to shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the disability tax credit, which is something I talk about a lot in my work with the folks that I work with, and some of the other programs that you can access. And then just touch briefly on the Trillium drug benefit program, which might be very familiar to folks. And then lastly, just touch on some equipment funding or device funding that might be available for folks who are eligible. So we can go to slide 3 if you can, Ian.
There you go.
I can't see it on my end.
I can't change the volume either.
Okay.
You can't see it at all on your end?
No, it's okay. As long as other folks can see it, I can just talk.
Yeah. Can I just ask the people that are on the presentation, can you guys see the EI sickness and benefits slide? Hold on. There we go. Presentation for 1 second. Yeah, okay. 1 second here. Rosanna, are you able to see or you can't see it? 1 second.
All I can see is financial resources and supports.
Okay.
And then beside that slide is agenda.
Yep. Got it.
That's the same as
income supports, disability tax credit, and Trillium drug program.
Got it. How about now?
Still the same.
Same.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Woohoo. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Um, so in working with patients with MS, obviously sometimes there's times where folks who are working and they're not able to continue working due to a medical issue. So we will explore for options for them for going off of work. So generally, I encourage people to explore if they have any coverage through their workplace. So that's sick leave, short term disability, or long term disability. Definitely exhausting some of those options first before exploring some of the government based programs. A lot of folks don't have access to that, so then we would look towards some of these government programs. So EI sickness benefits essentially the government's version of a short-term disability. So if you're eligible, have a medical reason where you cannot work. We often see this if folks are having a relapse or a flare-up of MS symptoms. So this will be benefits accessed through EI, the EI program that you pay into with your paycheck for coverage up to 26 weeks. It does give you 55% of your earnings over that potentially 26-week period to a maximum of, I think, just over $600 per week. In order to qualify, you obviously have to have a medical reason, and a physician would have to provide a medical certificate for that. And then you would have had to accumulate the appropriate amount of hours in the 52 weeks before starting your claim. So essentially, the government's version of a short-term disability if you don't have access to those types of benefits through your workplace. It is important to remember to apply as soon as you can, as soon as you stop working. If you delay more than 4 weeks, then you could potentially lose out on benefits that you may be eligible for. Can we hop to the next slide, Ian? So if you've sort of maxed out your EI sickness benefits and are continuing to not be able to return to work because of a medical reason, and you don't have access to long-term disability, the government's version of long-term disability is Canada Pension Plan disability benefits. So again, these are long-term benefits for folks in the form of a monthly payment who are not able to return to work because of a medical issue or a disability. So to be eligible, you have to have contributed to CPP while working and have a mental or physical disability that prevents you from being able to work. And your disability must be considered long-term, so probably longer than a 6-month or a 12-month period. If you do qualify, the amount that you receive in a monthly payment is dependent on how much you have contributed to the program over the years in your career. So I usually always give the example of someone who's a new Canadian who's been working in Canada and contributing to CPP for 5 years. That's going to look very different in what they might be able to access on a monthly basis versus someone who's been working for 30 years in Canada and contributing to the program. It's a 2-part application. There's a physician portion of the application as well as a patient portion of the application where you have to talk about your disability, talk about your medical condition, and how that prevents you from working. We'll just hop to the next slide just to continue the point here. So this is directly from Service Canada website that just gives a snapshot of how much folks are able to access if they are eligible for CPP. So on average, folks are about getting $1,200 or so a month, and the maximum is around for 2025 is what they're anticipating is close to $1,700 a month. So that's you've made maximum contributions to CPP over your career. It's important to note that CPP, unlike ODSP, which I'll highlight in a few minutes, does have very strict limits on how much you can earn, any income coming in while you're receiving those benefits. So I think for 2025, the income limit for CPPD is $7,100 a year pre-tax, and you have to report any of these earnings to CPP or to Service Canada, sorry. And if if you earn more than that 7,100, that can impact your eligibility because it's sort of showing to them that you might not actually meet the criteria, that you can't work because of a medical condition or a disability, right? So like if you have a little side hustle or something like that, I had a patient who was selling Avon on the side, so she had to be really conscious of how much she was bringing in through that venture, so it didn't impact her benefits. So we'll hop to the next slide about Ontario Works and ODSP. So these are the the Ontario government social programs, where the other two programs are federally based through Service Canada. So Ontario Works is meant to be short-term financial assistance for folks who not necessarily have a disability or a medical condition, but for folks who are out of work or who are looking for work. It's meant to be, again, short-term sort of emergency funding. Whereas ODSP, Ontario Disability Support Program, is meant to be that longer term social assistance for people who cannot work because of a disability or a medical condition and maybe don't have access to some of those other government programs like CPPD for whatever reason, depending on what line of work they were in or what have you, or they don't have very many contributions that they can draw on. The financial eligibility for ODSP and Ontario Works are essentially the same. You have to sort of satisfy that criteria, that financial eligibility for ODSP, and then you also have to satisfy that disability eligibility for ODSP. But if you've essentially satisfied the financial eligibility for OW, it's essentially the same as ODSP. There are, when you're doing that application for financial eligibility, there are asset limits that they'll take into consideration for people who are applying. So just some examples. So for Ontario Works, for a single person applying, the asset limit is $10,000. So that's savings, RRSPs, things that you have liquid. They look at the number of vehicles you have, things like that. And for ODSP, a single person who's applying, believe the asset limit's $40,000, and that will change depending on the number of dependents that you have, and if you have a spouse, the asset limit will go up slightly. That they'll take into consideration for your application. Once you've sort of satisfied for ODSP, that financial eligibility, they'll invite you to sort of stage 2, which is the disability eligibility that's determined through the disability determination package. That's a 2-part application. One part is yours, in your own words, how does your disability affect your ability to work? And then also from your physician about how your disability, your neurologist, whoever you're working with, affects your ability to work. The other piece that if you do qualify for ODSP, important to note, unlike CPP, you can earn some money from a job. The limit is $1,000 a month before your benefit is impacted. Your spouse also can earn some money if you live with a spouse, but again, the money that's coming in is going to impact your benefit. So this snapshot just gives on this slide a sense of how much folks can access from either program. There has been a slight increase in 2024, not as much as I think we were hoping for, but this gives a sense of how much you can get with the different scenarios of either being a single person, having a dependent, having multiple dependents, having a spouse. Still not a ton of money, but obviously some help coming in for folks who are unable to work because of a disability. The amount you receive is also impacted by other sources of income. So I've seen people have some income coming in from CPP disability. Let's say they've got $800 coming in from CPPD, but then they can get a slight top up from ODSP as well, depending on the circumstances. We'll hop to the next slide. Important to remember also too with ODSP, the really great feature of the program, as well as Ontario Works, is that folks can have access to health benefits when they are eligible for ODSP. I think really importantly for this group and MS patients is the prescription drug coverage. So you would have coverage for medications under ODB, the Ontario Drug Benefit formulary. So any of the drugs that are covered there would be covered for you, and that's for Ontario Works and ODSP. With ODSP, those health benefits are extended a bit. This is just, again, snapshot of some of the pieces that that they can support with. I think for this group, really important support for transportation to medical appointments, which I help folks with sort of setting up with ODSP quite often, as well as support for medical supplies, incontinence products, needles, insulin needles, things like that, as well as really importantly, funding for medical equipment, assistive devices, gait aids, things like that. So extended benefits with ODSP that can be really helpful for our patients. Hop to the next slide, Ian. So shifting gears a little bit to talk about the disability tax credit. So the disability tax credit is something I get asked about probably 4 times a day. There's a lot of, I think, confusion about it and what it looks like. So hopefully I can demystify it a little bit for you. I'm certainly not an expert. I'm still trying to navigate some of these scenarios as well too. But from my understanding and my experience, so the disability tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit that helps people with disabilities reduce the amount of income tax that they have to pay. I think the really important piece that folks learn in working with me is that, and kind of working through this process, is that eligibility is based on an impairment or a disability and not on a diagnosis. So different than from something like critical illness insurance, where that is based on like simply just a diagnosis of MS or of NMO or whatever you're looking at. So there's the categories here listed on the slide of disability that would qualify someone for the tax credit. So to be eligible, you have to have the language that they use is called a marked restriction in a particular category, which means that you're unable to do the activity or it takes 3 times as longer than someone without the impairment to do that activity. The other piece too that's really important is that the disability or marked impairment has to be expected to be continuous for a period of 12 months. So this eligibility piece is sometimes a challenge that we have with our MS patients, particularly if you think about if you have a relapse or a flare of symptoms, you might satisfy the criteria for walking. Let's say you're having a really difficult time with your walking because of a flare-up, but we're not expecting that to be a continuous flare up, right? We're expecting you to sort of level out maybe somewhere near your baseline, depending on the situation, right? So I think something that I run into very often with our patients is that I don't think the disability tax credit does a good job of recognizing conditions like MS that might have that relapsing remitting nature, depending on the type of MS that you have. I also think too that the disability tax credit really does not do a good job of recognizing invisible disabilities that are so common with conditions like MS. So that's just my opinion and some of the challenges that I find with the program. But hopefully something we can continue to sort of advocate for better recognition of. The other piece I just want to highlight too is that even if you don't have a marked restriction in one category, so let's say not like a marked restriction in the walking category, you can have what's called a significant limitation in multiple categories, and then you can apply with the cumulative effect of the significant limitation in those multiple categories. I'll give an example of one that I see quite often for patients with MS is that we have someone who has a significant limitation in the walking category, and they have a significant limitation due to bladder issues. So those two together, those cumulative effects of those significant limitations might be enough to qualify them. this is just a screenshot here from the walking category. This is right from the disability tax credit eligibility website, that you must meet the criteria below to have that marked restriction in the walking category. So just to give you a sense of what that eligibility looks like. You can hop to the next slide. If you are eligible for the disability tax credit, it does open a couple of doors for folks for access to some other programming, which is really nice. And some of them are quite new and coming soon. Most notably, I think folks, if you are eligible for the disability tax credit, that gives you access to be able to open a registered disability savings plan if you'd like. The Registered Disability Savings Plan, or RDSP, is a long-term savings plan designed for to help people with disabilities and their families save for the future. And with you can make obviously contributions to that RDSP, but then the government will also provide grants and bonds as well, a bit of a matching program. The RDSP can be opened up to age 59 and contributions can be made up to age 59, but the government grants and bonds stop at age 49. So just keeping that in mind for future planning if you are eligible and want to explore something like that. The other piece, which is quite new, is the Canadian Dental Care Plan, which is really exciting to have. And so you have to right now be eligible for the disability tax credit, plus your household has to be under $90,000 for your household income to qualify. It is slowly rolling out in terms of other groups that can apply for the Canadian Dental Care Program. I think right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's disability tax credit. Folks who are over the age of 65, but I think the next age group, which it would be like 55 to 64, the application is open, I think, May 1st, and it's slowly going to roll through those age brackets for people to apply. But again, you still have to satisfy that criteria of having a household under $90,000. The application's done online. It's quite simple. I've done a few with a few patients of mine recently, just in my office, and it takes probably less than 10 minutes to do. So something to consider if you already have a disability tax credit or you're looking to apply and you don't have dental coverage through other sources. And then lastly, coming soon in June, July 2025, if you do qualify for the disability tax credit, that will automatically qualify you for the Canada Disability Benefit. So it is an income tested benefit. So again, going to be adjusted. The amount of money that you receive is adjusted based on what your household income is. I think the maximum per month will be $200 a month, but again, that will be adjusted based on what your household income is, but automatically consider it if you have qualified for the disability tax credit. We'll switch it up. So this program might be very familiar to people, anyone who is currently on a DMT or on a medication, but I'll just touch on it briefly if it's for folks just to have in your back pocket in case something changes in regards to your medication coverage, if you lose coverage or if your coverage changes. So the Trillium Drug Benefit Program is an Ontario-run program for patients with high costs of prescription drugs and who have either no private insurance coverage or limited private insurance coverage. Let's say if there's exclusions or it's only 50% or something like that. So when you apply, they would calculate a deductible for your household. That deductible is for everyone who lives in your home. Obviously, you can make adjustments if like you're in a roommate situation. If you rent a room on your own, you have no other shared household expenses with someone else, let's say, just as an example. Your deductible is determined by your household income, and the deductible is approximately 4% of your household income for the year. That yearly deductible is divided into quarters. So I always give the example, let's say your deductible is $1,000. You're going to break that up into 4 of quarters, which match the financial quarters. So you're paying out of pocket $250 per quarter. And then the rest of any prescription medication costs are covered after that $250. Then you would roll over to the next quarter and do the same thing again. Important to remember too that the Trillium program only covers medications under the ODB, the Ontario Drug Formulary, just like ODSP or Ontario Works in terms of their coverage. If any of you are enrolled in Trillium currently, and you're maybe having a difficult time with affording your deductible, sometimes deductibles can be quite high depending on what your income level is, your household income is, and you're on a disease modifying therapy. A lot of the patient support programs, a lot of the PSPs will provide some financial support with the cost of the deductible, if that's ever something that you're having a difficult time with. So I'd encourage you, like next time you're speaking with your PSP, if this is a situation that you're in, definitely explore that with them. I find the PSPs to be incredibly helpful in navigating that. If it's something that you're coming up against, they often will provide that support, which is great. We'll just hop almost done to some other funding opportunities that I often access for patients when they need access to funds for various equipment. So there's a couple of options out there. The first is the MS Canada Quality of Life Grant. They have up to $1,000 a year per patient to access for assistive devices or equipment needs. There is a income limit on that. I think it's around where like the LEGO cutoff, the low income cutoff. The application is done online, but there is a health provider part of the application and patient part of the application where you just have to talk about sort of why you need this funding and how this equipment or this funding will make a difference for you. And the health provider portion can either be your physician or it can be an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist, whoever is doing the prescribing of the equipment. So if you've been assessed by an occupational therapist for a walker and they're making that recommendation, they would be the one to initiate that application for you. They also have a separate kind of part of that funding specifically for cooling products, which I think is really great and recognizes that patients with MS are often affected by heat or have heat intolerances. So you can apply for this funding for air conditioners, cooling vests, fans. I had helped a patient apply a little while ago, and MS Canada ended up just like purchasing the air conditioner directly and sending it to her house, which was great and really helpful and impactful, especially in those really hot summer months as we're hopefully coming into some better weather soon. Quickly highlighting as well, the March of Dimes has a fund up to $10,000 for home and vehicle modifications, for accessible modifications to either home or a vehicle. Again, has that low income cutoff consideration, but can make a really big difference for folks who are looking to make some changes to make their home or their vehicle more accessible and more safe for them. And lastly, just quickly touching on the assistive devices program. So offers funding for very specific mobility devices, so rollator walkers, wheelchairs, AFOs, and they provide 75% of the cost of the equipment if you are eligible. Patients are left with that 25% and then can explore the quality of life grant to provide that other 25% as needed, depending on the cost of the equipment. But patients don't apply for this type of programming directly. It has to be applied for by an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist, someone who is ADP authorized, we say. So not every OT or every PT is ADP authorized. So just keeping that in mind when you're working with someone in terms of questions to ask. So we'll just hop to the last slide. Oh, yes, perfect. I know I had this is a lot of information, and again, this is meant to be just very high level review of sort of what's out there. So I recognize there's probably a lot of questions about more specifics to your situation or what that looks like for you. I'm just going to plug a program that I work with quite closely, and I actually refer some of my patients to as well through Wood Green Community Services. They offer financial empowerment counseling, and they can dig into your situation much more than this presentation, or even I can sometimes in my role, in terms of what tax benefits you might be eligible for, really maximizing sort of your financial situation and seeing what you might be eligible for. So if you are looking for some more support outside of your care team or your physician, this program is really great. I just want to give them a shout out if you are looking for some more support. I hope I didn't put you to sleep like this is my little guy, Mulligan. But I'm happy to stick around for any questions. I recognize that was a lot of information. Certainly do my best to answer things as generally as possible for the group. So happy to stick around. Thank you so much for having me.
Whoops. Thanks very much, Madison. I'm just whoops, sorry, just raising this thing here just to see if there's any questions in the room or online. Just give me 1 second because I'm trying to
Of
get
course, yeah.
so everybody can see there we go. I think everybody can, so not here. 1 second here. Multiple, see that. Okay. Anyhow, does anybody have any questions in the room? I've got a question here, so I'm going to pass the microphone along. Hello, hello. Okay, go ahead and shut it out, and I'll repeat it if I need to. Did you hear that, Madison?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay, what is meant by PSP?
Oh, patient support programs. So patient support programs, if you are on a disease modifying therapy, Ocrevus, Kesimpta, what have you. So those are the programs that would help to make arrangements for you for that medication, and can provide some financial assistance with the cost of your deductible if you're having a difficult time affording that deductible.
There any other? Oh, so Madison,
Mm-hmm.
how is that accessed? Is that through your social worker, or where does that get accessed?
The patient support program?
Yes.
So it's only if you're on that type of therapy, right? So I'm sure if you like went around the room, people might be on different types of MS drugs, or they might not be, right? Depending on what the situation is, but you're only connected with that program if you're on that medication.
So let me give an example, and Madison, you can correct me. So,
Sure.
for example, I take Ocrevus, right? And I forget who provides that, but I'd have to go to that
Compass.
there. So I'd have to go through them to apply for the PSP.
So Compass is the PSP.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Compass is the patient support program. So they're the ones that, like Ian, they would reach out to you to make the arrangements for your infusion, and remind you to do your blood work. When you would have been enrolled in that with that drug, they would have provided you education on what that looks like. So if you don't have private coverage, they would also explore with you what your coverage situation is, right? What your medication coverage situation is for that MS medication or that DMT. And so if you are in a situation where your only coverage is Trillium and your deductible is quite high or you're having a difficult time affording it, the PSPs can work with you if you're on that particular medication to help with the cost. If that's something that you're having a challenge with, it wouldn't be something that maybe everyone would have access to if you're not on that medication, right? Does that make sense?
So yeah, so another point being made is, so for example, Compass should contact. I know they contacted me. So the drug company, or sorry, the PSP is supposed to
PSP.
contact you. So what happens if they have not? Is the question.
Are you being enrolled with that medication?
Well, I'm asking if somebody's on Trillium and they're getting medication for a specific, and they financially cannot afford the added, you know.
The deductible?
Yeah.
Right. So where did they go if they have not been contacted?
So, but which medication is it that you're on?
So they got, but cannot afford the extra cost. And he has to be on Trillium because he needs the medication.
So did you hear that, Did you hear that?
No, sorry, I
So,
didn't.
for example, this one is also on a diabetes medication and can't
Mhm.
afford the the extra cost of diabetes through Trillium.
Mhm.
So, who would contact that individual then?
So the diabetes world is a totally different world as well too. I would encourage you to speak with your like with your endocrinologist and with your team like that handles your diabetes care because they often have relationships with some of the drug companies as well too to see if there's any compassionate coverage that they can provide. Obviously, Ocrevus or like depending on if you're on an MS medication, they're going to be able to provide assistance and support kind of from the MS side, right? For the cost of that deductible. But I'd encourage you if you're connected with a diabetes clinic, to speak with their team to see if they can provide any financial support for the cost of some of those medications as well.
Great, thank you. Any other
I know
questions?
that's not a super satisfying answer, but
Any other questions in the room? No? Let me just see if there's any questions online. Nope. So Madison, on behalf of sorry, did you? No?
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask, like, we just recently got the disability tax credit. How can you maximize it if you miss those years and you can't contribute after 49 years old? Like, let's say if I get 43. Well, if I'm not gonna have enough time to
Did-
maximize that, right?
Did you hear that, Madison?
not quite.
Okay,
Sorry.
so if somebody, so this is for the donation program where you can contribute to your 49, the government program.
Mhm.
So if at 43 you start contributing, but the cutoff is you get matching until 49, and you
Mhm.
only get matching for 6 years, how is
Mhm.
going to leave enough money for when that individual turns 70, let's say, or 65?
Well, that would only be one source of like, let's say your retirement income, right? I think it's still a good idea to take advantage of any of those like programming and any of those like grants and bonds that the government can provide because it's essentially money you wouldn't have access to otherwise, right? But after age 65, you would start to have access to regular Canada Pension Plan if you've contributed to CPP, plus depending on your income level you also have access to OAS, old age security, after age 65. So thinking about some of those other kind of avenues or other sources of income that are also coming in at that age, right? I do think it isn't like the RDSP, if you can qualify, is a really unique opportunity that not a lot of folks have access to.
Can you back contribute, i.e., if the individual turns 48 this year, can you back contribute for years you didn't, or no?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so because it's based on when you qualify, right? Because maybe at 46 you didn't qualify for the DTC, but then at 48 you did. It's all about when you had that qualification.
But the disability tax credit goes backwards, right? So could this go backwards?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. It might be
Okay.
a good question for like the individual like financial institution that you open the RDSP
Well,
with.
our next speaker might be able to assist with
Okay,
that. And we have one more
great.
question from the floor.
If someone is, the example is my daughter, she's working, but she's been diagnosed with MS.
Mhm.
And obviously, you know, right now you just take some time, sick time off, you will just cover it under the work. But the disability tax credit, is that something she can apply onto her filing? Is that something she can, because let's say if she's looking, you know, it lowers her income, but it helps her in the long run if she needs to go get equipment and stuff like that for herself, right? I mean,
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I fully understood the question, but if you can still be working and apply for the disability tax credit, right? The disability eligibility for Ontario Works or for on ODSP or CPP disability is not the same as the disability tax credit eligibility. So absolutely, there are people that I know that I work with who are receiving the disability tax credit, and because they meet that eligibility criteria, but it doesn't mean that they're on long-term disability or on short-term disability. Those two things are separate.
Yeah.
So is that something she would just have to talk with her accountant?
So what you need to do is there's a form you can start filling it online. Your doctor has to fill out a large component of the form.
Yeah.
And then it's sent in to our friends at Revenue Canada, and they
the
take
CRA.
about 16 weeks or so to look at it. They're backed up, and then they give you the approval. And you can do it from whenever you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So let's say you were diagnosed in your daughter's case.
Not necessarily diagnosis, though.
Okay, sorry, when you have disability,
Yeah.
sorry.
When you have that impairment,
Yeah, sorry,
because
the impairment.
because diagnosis doesn't equal eligibility, right? It's when that impairment
Sorry,
has
that
started,
was,
or when that accumulative effect of those impairments have started. But yes, like if that impairment started in 2000, then absolutely that can be backdated to that point. But even though you might have been diagnosed with MS in 2017, right? Depending on sort of what those changes might look like.
So it can go sorry to correct
Mm.
that. If you have a disability that was diagnosed in 2022, you could go back to 2022, and the tax credit, depending on income level, works out to about $2,500 a year, is what it works out to roughly.
Mhm.
Okay. No problem. Any other questions in the room? No. And anything else online? Nope. So Madison, thank you very, very much for the time today. It's
course.
much appreciated. And we have, we have a gift, and it'll be sent to you. It'll be sent to the hospital, actually. So it'll show up at St. Mike's probably in a week. Oh, well, it might even be there on Wednesday or Thursday of this week coming up.
That's very
So-
lovely. Thank you guys so
so-
much for having me, and hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to share the slides as well too.
Great. Thanks very much. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a 10 to 15-minute break. So we'll pick up at 2:15 for the next presentation. Thanks again, Madison, and everybody will be back at 2:15.
Take care.
One of the packages of ground beef.
And then
Is that for the screen?
no. I'm gonna
We need some sausage meat for tomorrow.
Mhm.
Why don't you, I mean, we don't want a whole package of sausage meat in there, do we? In the stuffing for a small bird.
So-
like that?